I don't want to keep anybody waiting. I want to respect everyone's time. My name is Jesse Gatson. I am going to be one of your moderators today. I am a mentee with the Black Mental Wellness, and this has been a great experience for me and a great opportunity. I am now looking for different doctoral programs to get into. Looking at different schools. I'm in the New York area, so I'm looking schools there so that I can, further my studies and my love for this field. I will also introduce Aubrey. He's also another one of the moderators that you're going to have today. I'm going to read your bio. So Aubrey is a postdoc fellow at Georgetown University Hospital, the Wise Center. His work consists of providing therapy to school leaders, staff, and school-aged children. His research interests include experience and effects of racism on monetary youth, community violence exposure, and the development and implementation of cultural relevant prevention and intervention programs for urban minority youth. Aubrey obtained his Bachelor's of Science in Psychology from Loyola University in Chicago and his Master's in Arts in Clinical Psychology from George Washington University. A significant portion of his clinical work has been focused on providing therapy to youth and families of color. Prior to joining MedStar Wise, Aubrey worked with Children's National Medical Center, the Alexandria Department of Community and Human Services, KIPP DC Public Charter Schools, and served as adjunct faculty for Georgetown University. We also have James Logan. He is one of our panelists today. He is the founder and the CEO of Higher Level Coaching. It's a high performance career and life coaching firm. He also serves as the program coordinator at the University of Michigan, working within the Office of Academic Multicultural Initiatives, where he works with students from underrepresented backgrounds to assist them in reaching their personal, academic, and professional goals. Prior to his current role, he worked at the Ross School of Business at the University of Michigan, where he helped students from diverse backgrounds gain access to business education and business career. James started his career as an international recruitment coordinator for the University of Michigan Flint, where he traveled more than 30 countries to recruit international students and build global partnerships. James graduated with a BA in sociology from the University of Michigan in 2008. And in his spare time, he enjoys mentoring, traveling, writing, coaching youth sports, and spending time with his wife, Brittany, and their children, James II, Jacob Jackson, Sloan, and Jude. And then we have another one of our panelists, Napoleon. Napoleon is the founder and therapist of the Ambassador Counseling and Resource Group, ACRG. It's a collaborative counseling organization dedicated to providing people and professionals with proficient counseling and training services. Upon earning his bachelor's degree, he was awarded the Human Relations Award, a significant honor given to one graduating senior at Oakland University. Napoleon is an engaging presenter with national experience and has been a keynote speaker on multiple occasions, ranging from the university convocation and commencement experiences to professional conference appearances. In 2012, he was awarded the Adjunct Faculty of the Year Award for his academic and professional contributions to his colleagues and the undergraduate student body. Napoleon's leadership has been recognized by civic organizations and government officials. In January of 2016, he was inducted into the 5th class of the Elite 40 Under 40 of Oakland County by County Executive L. Brooks Patterson. He's recently been inducted as alumni and class president of the 28th class of Leadership Oakland, a nationally recognized premier leadership program. He is also serving as the president of Mental Health Counselors Association. In that role, Napoleon was instrumental in the passage of legislation that rescued the licensed professional counselor from a detrimental and uncertain future. Oakland University has equipped Napoleon with many experiences that inspire him to develop his counseling, speaking and speaking skills, to be a voice of a voice of courage for people facing a variety of fears and challenges. Napoleon has had multiple television appearances and been featured as a radio guest on a variety of times to discuss mental behavior health and psychology related topics. He's written multiple articles for national and local publications on topics related to mental health and wellness. He has a passion for people and has made it his mission to cultivate optimum mental, physical, and spiritual well being of those he comes in contact with. Napoleon is effectively known as the Courage Counselor. He lives in Auburn Hills with his wife, Faith, and his twin girls, Isabella and Amani. Those are our lovely, talented, strong Black male panelists that we have today. Thank you for the honor of moderating this session and introducing you brothers. Audrey, I'm going to hand it to you to start us off.
All right. Yeah, we got some real strong brothers in this chat today and in this session. So excited for us to get started. I guess our first question, I think, is really just important to kind of lay the foundation of this session, which is really kind of like understanding Black men and mental health. What does it mean to be a Black man in 2021? And I'll let either one of y'all take this.
I can take it real quick. And I think so. First, it's hard to put a what it means to be a Black man into a box. So I am coming from a cisgender heterosexual perspective, right? Like I grew up in a Christian household, single family household, low income. So my perspectives are, a result of my background, what I think, and how I grew up and how, so that's my perspective. So I think that's for one. You can't really put, there's people that, Black males are completely outside of that perspective or, share some of those identities. And I want to recognize that and acknowledge that first of all. But I think no matter where you come from and what background, me and my brother's writing a book called 100 Things Every Black Man Needs to Know Before the Age of 30. And the idea is there's some things, no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, if you're a Black man in America, there's some experiences that you go through. So I think one, being a Black man in America is being maybe in a constant state of rage or apathy, right? Like either you really are like fed up and frustrated with what's going on, or you're like so beat down that you don't care. You know what I mean? Like, so I think, and I think it's also something in between, right? Maybe one day you wake up really like frustrated and really want to do something about it. And other days you feel like the pressures of the world are so heavy that you chill and you relax and you escape, right? So I think it's dynamic. I think it is constantly thinking about, when I go out, when I leave the house, honestly, and this is something I think about every time I leave the house, am I comfortable enough to go to jail? And it might sound crazy, but I'm like, all right, do I have a hoodie on? Will I be comfortable if I had to spend a night in jail? Like, do I have gym shoes on? Or I'm not going out in flip-flops, right? Like, I'm not going out in something I can't be comfortable with, because at any moment, I feel like I could be pulled over based on me being a Black male, based on me being intimidating. To think, and so I think about those things. I think about, I got 5 kids. I think about at any moment, I am a concealed pistol carrier, license holder, and at any moment I realize that I might have to defend my life, right? Or think about my kids not being there kind of without me, right? And that's something that I talk to my kids about a lot too. Is, hey, look, my job is to help you operate when I'm not around, right? So these things are what it means to be a Black man in 2021. These things are constant things that go through my mind. Go in a state of biting my tongue, right, at work, right, not saying exactly how I feel, not because of the repercussions that it might come and because of the perception that it might give off. So those are just a few things that I want to just pull out without going into so much detail and take away time up from the other panelists.
I reflect so many of them same sentiments, James. I mean, I thought I didn't, it's hard to believe that somebody else thinks, am I wearing a hood? Like, and depending on where you are, should I put it on? I mean, my head could be cold, and if I put it on, what does that mean? And what's that gonna, what's the irreversible actions that might happen because I have it on. But I also build on your same thoughts, and I believe there's a lot to speak when it comes to progress. We're standing on the shoulders of giants who have done remarkable things ahead of us, and we're living in the light that they produced before us. And I think another thing that's really important is the idea of having to consistently live in the shadow of the past. So while we're living in we're walking contradictions, right? We're the most picked apart, most researched, most studied species on the planet. The Black man is, and because of that, they being people who research us tend to believe that they know more about us than we know about ourselves. So we're standing in a space where progress is who we are, but we also have a lot of challenges in front of us because the obstacles that sit in front of us they're ever growing. No matter how many times you pass legislation, no matter how many times you overcome another mountain, it seems like there's another presentation of mountains in front of us. So it's a huge marker of progress, but it's also a struggle. So I don't want to understate the role of Black men in society today, but it is certainly progress because of whose shoulders we stand on, and it's also struggle because of the direction that we have to go in the future. So being a Black man takes tons of courage, and more than the average person, I tend to believe.
I like that. It takes courage, and it's definitely something as simple as walking out the door, and so many thoughts that we have going in our mind, and so many thoughts that our loved ones have. Our wives, our mothers, our children will hopefully this isn't the last time I'm seeing this person. So that leads us into our next question. What does self-care look like? How do we, take care of ourselves? What does it look like for Black men? What helps us facilitate self-care for you in particular, and what makes it difficult?
As a mental health clinician, I think one of my first priorities is always reminding how important it is for us to have self-care, and it's different for everybody. And I personally, what my strategies are for self-care is, number one, you have to slow down and rest. I mean, rest is key. All of us, I'm sure if you are a Black man who is doing his best through life and by his family, we tend to, my mother told me this, and I didn't believe her, but she told me, you have to work 10 times harder. And when you're young, you don't think about that. But when you get out here and you start working against a current that it seems to be carrying everybody else, you are working 10 times harder just to get to a space. So rest is key, and not being afraid to take that rest. All of us, I'm sure, are familiar with grinding and pushing and going. And the reality is, you can only grind so long. That same ox that grinds has to rest in order to get a great, a great product. So rest is key. I'm a huge fan of spending time with family. I've got two girls that I got to chase around, Isabella and Amani. And they're amazing little people, and spending time with family helps to recharge. The other thing is connecting spiritually as often as possible. That is a great way for me to gain self-care, because I know that there are areas that I can't care for myself in terms of spiritually what's best for me. So I lean to my faith to help inform me when I need those spaces filled. So self-care looks different for everybody, but as long as you're taking that time, which is very key to do it, it's great.
And I would agree with those things, Napoleon. And I would also add that one of my mentors used to say, learn how to stay sane in an insane place. So whatever you do, whatever it is, whatever it takes for you not to drive yourself into a wall and go, I hate to use the term in the Black mental wellness, but go crazy, for lack of a better term, like, do that, right? Try to stay sane in an insane place is one, noticing, what your triggers, right? Noticing when you might go into a depression, noticing when you might feel sad, noticing when you might not feel your best, noticing at what time of day or what time of week you feel like you need to just rest. And I agree 100% with that. That's something that I didn't take heed to when I was in my 20s. It's like, rest for what? Sleep is the cousin of death, right? Like, all the things that we hear about sleep and resting, and you got to grind and you got to sleep, work while your opponents and your competitors are sleeping. I adopted those philosophies, but now in my 30s, yeah, right, I'm getting my sleep. If I'm tired, I'm gonna chill. if I need the nap, I'm gonna recharge, right? Like, so that's really, I agree, Napoleon. And I'm working, in between all the obligations that I have to do, 16-hour days, 17-hour days. So one of my self care techniques is really, at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, I got, I got 5 kids, a wife, and, I'm coaching and running a business and, going to the 9 to 5. So at the end of the day, no matter how tired I am, I'm really going to decompress for a good 45 minutes, an hour, whether that's work, watching sports, scrolling the Instagram. I mean, I'm going to do something that's for me at the end of the day. And of course, working out, right? I get to work out, fortunately, with my kids. They all in sports. They're about the age where I can kind of keep up with them. They go take me over in a minute. But of course, that releases endorphins, right? No matter how much, how difficult it is to work out, but get your heart rate pumping. Do something active every day. You're going to feel better. And it gives you a little bit more energy to, to press the weight of the world.
Yeah, these are such great points. And I'll add to it, because I mean, you all are hitting on, like, really the important self-care tips, right? That we need. I think one thing my grandma always said was, look for the blessing in the day. And to me, that's a part of our self-care, right? Because a lot of times we grind so hard. James, as you said, like, you working 16-hour days, you got a wife, you got kids, you got another business, like you moving, right? But it's also like, well, what did I do today that was great? Or what was important for me that I can hold on to from today? So that's one thing. The second thing that I often say to people that I work with, and just friends and colleagues, is like, how far away have we gotten from the things we actually used to love and enjoy, right? So I'm like, what did you enjoy when you were 10, right? Maybe try that this week, right? Try that this month. And like, think about how much joy that actually brings you. Like, Napoleon, I just saw your face, and like, you thought about something and you were like, oh snap, I remember that. Like, and that's just a joyful moment, right? And so just doing that, that's self-care, because it brings you back to what's for me, what's taking care of the self, right? So yeah, great points. I think, if we want to transition to the next question, just to kind of keep us moving a little bit. So we talk about self-care, but I think it's also important to talk about, like, what does it look like for us as Black men to be vulnerable? And what does being vulnerable mean to you all? Like, what is that?
I can start. I love this question. I love the idea of being vulnerable. And we talked a little bit about this when we in our pre-call with Napoleon. Like, I'm an open book, and I love being on panels and sharing about my 12 years of marriage and growing up, whatever it is, and wanting to have kids at an early age. But I think being vulnerable is one, being very self-aware, right? Like, I think a lot of times we might lack self-awareness. People might lack self-awareness. So I like to think about being self-awareness at a multiple levels is being a self-expert. First step of being self-aware, then ultimately you want to be a self-expert and really know yourself well. Know, again, like I mentioned earlier, know those triggers. But part of being knowing yourself well is trying to get people to tell you So let me break it down real quick. Self-awareness, three levels to me, right? First level is, you just knowing yourself very well, knowing what you want, knowing what you don't want, knowing your relationship to people, places, and things, how you respond to stimuli, things like that. And then the second level is being very knowledgeable and being very aware of what other people think about you. And it's not just random strangers, but people that you love, people that love you, right? Like, so for example, I'm in college and I'm going through this journey of self-awareness, and I ask my boys, I'm like, what y'all think about me? Like, for real, like, what y'all really think about me? And I was going to Michigan at the time. They all went to Eastern right down the street. And they were like, for real, James? Like, you arrogant. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? I'm arrogant. I'm like, me? Arrogant? What you saying? And I'm like, give me an example. And they say, well, you correct people's speech, right? I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. That is kind of arrogant. That's kind of like, but I got defensive at first, and I got mad about it at first. But then I'm like, you know what? I'm glad I asked that, because all right, the third level was really like, what did I do to make them feel arrogant? What did I do to make them feel like felt like I was better than them, or more important? And I told them to give me an example, and they did. I'm like, all right, you're right, And so moving forward, I got that information, I got that data to really kind of change what I want to change about myself and really be my best self. So that's one thing I like to preach is being your best self. And being your best self is being honest with yourself and being honest with others, and and when you're honest and open with yourself, you almost give people permission to be honest and open with you. So being vulnerable to me is being open and honest 100%, keeping it a buck, right? Like, and if, really, y'all really got to know you like that to be honest, because I'm sure about myself. I'm sure about the decisions that I make. And I believe that allowing me to be honest, or being honest, allows you to be honest with yourself, and allows you to maybe open up about some things that you might have challenges with. And that's the first step in getting help, right? So I think it's really important for us to be vulnerable. Of course, we need to guard our feelings, guard our heart, but that's being vulnerable with the right people. So family, friends, right? Like, again, I was in the living room with all my best friends from 2nd grade, 7th grade, and I could be open with them, and they felt comfortable enough to be open with me, even though we got into an argument afterwards, right? Like, they were open and honest enough with me for me to be able to become a better, my higher self and my better self. So I think being vulnerable is really being honest and first open with yourself, the challenge that you might face, some of the struggles you might have, and then being confident enough to be open and honest with other people that love you, that want to see you succeed.
James preached the message. I mean, we could pass the plate, because and in his example, it was so clear what vulnerability is. I mean, that's a blazing example of it, because the greater the self-awareness, the greater the possibility of becoming vulnerable. And a lot of people don't like vulnerability or are afraid of vulnerability, because it does open them up to honest critique, not just from other people, but honest critique of self. And when you've got too much honest critique of self and people don't know what to do with it, then self will look in on self and find self lacking. And if that happens, then people start to experience all kinds of levels of shame. So that kind of honesty is really important, because vulnerability is uncertain. We know it's uncertain because we don't know what kind of experience we're going to get when we interact with people. It's an exposure that comes with uncertainty. So like James said, he didn't know what his friends were going to say. And when they told him, no, this is what it is, bro. Whoa, wait a second. I didn't expect that. So vulnerability it's important, because it allows you to continue the willingness to grow and examine your life in a very meaningful way. And I can't give you the exact quote, but it's about the examined life and how valuable the best lived lives are. And it's the best lived lives are the ones that are examined, and the ones that pay attention to vulnerability and are willing to be open and definitely take care of what they learn about self when when you're vulnerable. And you tend to experience the best quality of love when you are most vulnerable. The more walls you have up, the less greater experience of love you have. So vulnerability is very important, and I echo all the same sentiments as James.
I definitely agree with you guys. Like you said, you guys are hitting on all points. One of the things I like to equate vulnerability with is love. And I tell my friends that I love them. The very first time I said this to one of my friends, he gave me this odd look. And I'm like, I don't love you in a romantic way, but I'm here for you. And whatever you need, as long as I can facilitate it, then I got you. I work with children also, and I tell especially my young Black boys that I love them, because you don't know if they're hearing it at home. Not that they're not loved at home, but that word, it's not always used in the home setting. So, that I definitely, just to add on to what you're saying, and don't forget to tell your friends, your family, you love them, because tomorrow isn't promised. That also leads us into our next question. It's definitely dealing with vulnerability and love. How do Black men protect their mental health in romantic relationships?
Carefully. um, and I do mean that word in its all of its sense, carefully, because vulnerability, if you think about it, happens along a continuum, and so does romance. One person, I mean, a lot of times relationships start off hot and heavy, and so you're both at a very similar place physically, but emotionally you might be at two different spaces, or mentally you might be in two different places. And I mean, physically you're in the same place, but you might be at two different spaces. So it's really important for Black men to be as secure in their sense of self first, so that they know how to go up and down that continuum with the person that they chose. And the reason why I say that is because if you are the most stable person in the relationship, you have the greater flexibility to continue back and forth along that continuum with a greater sense of encouragement, a greater sense of pride. You get to present the best parts of the relationship while the other person might be trying to figure it out. And the reason why I use continuum instead of doing it up and down, because sometimes they might be ahead of us, and we've got to meet each other in as many places as possible. So how do they protect their mental health in romantic relationships? Carefully, and by becoming it goes back to really being self-aware. The greater the self-awareness, the greater the ability you will have to be secure and be able to navigate the ebbs and flows of relationships.
Yeah, it definitely takes some maturity for sure, and self-awareness. I mean, emotional intelligence is I think a big piece in making sure that Black men protect their health. And part of that is understanding emotions of your partner, right? Understanding why they might be going through some things, right? Try to take a step back, right? Being mindful. They say being mindful is separating the stimulus from the response. So one way that I've stayed happily married for 12 years is I don't give in to a lot of the bull crap that my wife tried to throw at me. Like, I know when she want to argue, and I'm not giving her that same energy. I'm not returning that same energy. I know what time it is, right? So I believe being level-headed, taking a step back, right, trying to give it some room to breathe, is definitely important. But also, not projecting and not putting your mental illness or mental health, problems or challenges onto your partner, or not allowing that to permeate into your home, right? So, for example, right, like this past pandemic, I fell into a depression for sure, right, and I was yelling at my kids a lot more, snappy at my wife a lot more, and again, being self-aware, I'm thinking like, wait, I'm not usually this angry, and then she might be like, hey, babe, everything good? I'm like, yeah, everything good. Why you asking? Like, right, and I would again have to take a step back, right? Take a step back and try to separate the stimulus, whatever made me mad or made me upset, from my response. And my response was, affecting the kids in a certain way, was affecting my wife in a certain way. Again, I recognize I'm very extroverted. I'm very outward emotive. And I know that for me to recharge, I need to take some time with myself. So that's, part of my self-care routine is just really separating from the family. If it's 45 minutes for an hour, chill, step outside, take a break, I can do that and come back kind of recharge, right? And come back and really think about how my emotions and how my situation might be affecting the family, right, and affecting the people, because I realize when I'm snappy, now they snappy, right? And sometimes my wife the same way. When she's in a bad mood, then the whole family on eggshells almost in a way. But I think that just being really mindful of that and thinking about again the stimulus and the response piece, and being mature about some of the situations that you're having, and also the last piece I would say is pick your battles. I'm not arguing about everything in our relationship. I'm not arguing about very little things, but my brother and people close to me feel like my wife might be pushing me over or making the decisions. But when it comes to the big things, like I think are big, right, I'm kind of making those decisions, of course, with her. She's my partner, but I'm not some things are I'm leaving unsaid. One of my mentors, the same mentor, he said, sometimes you need to choose being happy over being right. So I just choose to let some things go. And again, that's the maturity piece and being in a relationship for so long.
If I might add, James prompted made me think of something that an old man told me once. Before I got married, he said, there are some things that you are going to, you have to fight. He said, but there are some things that you have to let go, even if you're right. Even if you're right. Because what happens a lot of times is if you have to be the heavy at the wrong time, you could destroy the quality of the relationship. But there are other things that if you're wrong, there are some things you have to go all the way for. I mean, if you're right and it's going to impact the quality of the relationship later, you have to hold on to that right. So when you said that, it definitely made me think about that sentiment.
I think one thing I definitely want to add, because I'm hearing everything you all are saying too, and I think it should be said, it's communication. That's also what you all are saying too. It's like in order for us to protect our mental health, we got to communicate too, right? And that's part of that vulnerability that you all were talking about too. Like, we're gonna be vulnerable, we got to communicate how we're feeling, right? Where those feelings are coming from, and know when to hold it, right? And then know when it's time to say something, and actually articulate, hey, this is how I'm feeling, here's where it's coming from and why. And also here's where I know I need to improve or hold back. So yeah. All right, so we kind of talked about protecting our mental health and
before you Aubrey, can you hear me? Before you move on to the next question, because I want to respect some of the people in the chat. There's someone who put a question in the Q&A for our panelists. I'll just read it to you guys. It says, how can the mental health profession insert themselves into the court system, specifically the family part of courts? Most of the decision makers are not Black men, judges, mental health, and or social workers.
You are now talking about a fight that I've been taking up for at least the better part of 10 years, and trying to include more people of color, and we've got to just start there, people of color, and primarily because court systems have oftentimes kept relationships with people who are attached to the system, not people who are in and out of the system. And so therefore, it's not necessarily designed to serve the people the way it's designed to serve them. I say that to say, if you have a therapist that does not necessarily reflect or understand your interests, well, then what happens a lot of times is you're not going to develop the relationship, and you'll be higher likely to reoffend. And so a lot of times it is a part of a system to keep that kind of regularity going, because otherwise, what if we did put people of color who are very efficient and effective at connecting with other people of color and helping them to resolve their situations and get out of the system? Well, you potentially run the risk of shutting a system down or creating the budget to be a whole lot lower. So I do sound like a conspiracy theorist when I say it, but I mean it. The system sometimes does not hope for inserting people of color into the mental health system. But for the ones that are advanced and are interested in it, what we have to do is train clinicians on how to interface more appropriately and effectively with those systems and set up arrangements with those spaces so that they can serve the folks who may look like them that come across the system. So take heart knowing that there are some places that are increasing in that regard. A lot of places in the Midwest, there are a few in the South that are doing it. We got a lot of work to do on the East Coast and a whole lot of work to do out West. So, but take heart knowing that it is very slowly moving, but we've got progress on the agenda.
All right, Aubrey, so you can go back to the question that you had to ask. I just wanted to make sure. And also for anybody else listening in, if you have any questions, you can enter it in the chat. There's a chat section and a Q&A section. If I see them come up, I will address them and get your questions answered. Back to you, Aubrey.
All right. I mean, I think having that question kind of segues into the next one, which is, you know, how can Black men protect their mental health when it comes to police brutality? And maybe even taking it further, the criminal justice system, right?
I will say one of my strategies, honestly, was to not engage, right? To not get involved, to really do. And I know this ain't for everybody, right? So I'm speaking from my perspective, right? But really, it was like to not deal with the police, right? And I know we can't help it sometimes, but as much as I could not deal with the police, I didn't want to. So, for example, I always say, like, Black men are scrutinized. In a perfect world, we should be able to do what the hell we want to do. In the perfect world, right? Like, I should be able to blast my music. I should be able to, if I wanted to break the law, I should be able to break the law for non-violent offenses and not fear getting killed. But I remember talking in college about Kwame Kilpatrick and how he got in trouble, and I'm like, he broke the law. He messed up. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing, is trying to avoid laying low, keeping your hands clean, keeping your nose clean. That's part of it. That's really a big part of our strategy. And what I mean by that is I'm not speeding like I used to. Believe me, the last time I went to jail, the only time I went to jail, I was speeding down 14, coming from campus, doing 90 and a 70. My license was suspended, so I got arrested and I went to jail. We had my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time. Part of the reason why she's my wife, she held me down, got me out. You know what I'm saying? I'm fighting the air, doing a whole Menace to Society thing. I'm pissed, right? But what did I do to get myself in that situation? You know what I'm saying? I had to look inward first before I started looking outward, before I started blaming people, before I started blaming the system. Not to say that it don't exist, not to say those pressures don't keep a brother down, but I am proud to say that my record is clean, right? I agree with Jesse that the only crime sometimes is being a Black man. But when we talk about breaking the law, right? Like, you know, not having knowledge of the law is no reason or excuse not to follow the law, right? We know that. My mom was a cop growing up, right? So she instilled a lot of things in us where it's like the good, respectable Negro, right? Type things, right? Like, don't draw no attention to yourself, right? Like, try to lay low, right? Understand that, right? We talked about it earlier. If I have a hood on, I might feel like I'm going to be targeted a little bit more. So I think that you know, part of it is trying to do your best to live a straightforward life. I had some options to do things that might be very lucrative, that, you know, but I'm like, I'm gonna get double the time for the same crime. You know what I'm saying? So I really have to think about and be mindful. One of my mentors saying one, I think it was a Walter Payton quote: begin with the end in mind, right? Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Begin with the end in mind. And I don't know if I was just cut like that, but I really thought very carefully about the things that I did and what the end result could look like. I think that's part of the reason why I classify and consider myself an expert problem solver because I can look at all the possibilities of an individual reaction or decision that I might make and the reaction that it might cause. So I'm very knowledgeable about that and how I move and what I do and things that I got right now. My car, right? They say that red cars get pulled over more than any other color car. I'm not getting a red car, right? Like just some things that I feel like I want to do to avoid detection, almost to follow and to fly under the radar, if you will, just so I can live long. Like part of one of the 100 things that every Black man needs to know is know how to survive, right? Like Nas said, the ink of a scholar is better than the blood of a martyr, right? Like we got to survive. They killing us at alarming rates, right? Like especially police brutality. We got to try our best to, right, knowing how to speak fluent white man. That's a survival technique. When a cop pull you over, it's a certain way you need to pronounce your words, right? The INGs and the ERs on the end of your words, potentially to try to stay alive, right? We are being hunted, right? We're not necessarily we're not in a war. I said we was in a war a long time ago, but to be in a war, you got to fight back. You got to have a strategy. You got to so we're being hunted. We're being hunted, so to speak, right? So I feel like that if we want to try to survive for my next generation, so we can teach them some of the things to advance, we need to do that by all means. I don't got a whole lot of other suggestions, but to, like Kanye said, you still a nigga in a coupe. So whether you get a nice car or not, again, being Black is the crime. We're haunted. We're strong. And I think that trying to do your best to stay under the radar, to fly under the radar is the best strategy that I came up with so far.
There's so much about what you said that I absolutely I agree with, because you're right. The hunted is always on the run. The gazelle knows that it better always run from the lion. But there's also a conversation related to knowing where the lion is and being able to stay away from spaces and stay away from places that actually put you in that position, which is really to the point that you're mentioning. But when it comes down to the unarmed Black men who are being selected, who are being chosen, picked on, and if you talk to many Black men, they will tell you about interactions that they've had with officers that were unwarranted, being accosted by police just because they were Black men, and they always, quote, end quote, fit the description. I'll never forget, I was sitting, and I will answer your question, but it just kind of, James fires me up a little bit. I was sitting in my parking lot, and I was at my office, the one I pay rent for, and I remember sitting there, and I was sending emails in my car, sitting in my car, and an officer parked the way he screeched, you would have thought I was trying to get away. My car wasn't even on. He screeched in front of me, hopped out of his car very quickly, and asked me to present, and told me to present my ID to him, and started making demands with his hand on his hip, and on the side of his gun with his hand on his hip. And he was starting making demands. Now, I'm a therapist. I'm not out here being, wild. But when he did that, I'm grateful that I knew as much or as many of my rights as possible, that I didn't have to respond to his request because it was unwarranted. And I had to be very thoughtful about how I responded, which goes back to James's point. So when you've got to know your rights, and you got to know what what you are supposed to and can and should do. That's one big part of the conversation. The other is to understand that when you have a target on your back, the thing that's the most important I can't say the most important, but the thing that is important is to make sure that you continue, if you see wrong happening, point it out, say something, so that those folks who are creating the wrong or doing the wrong, they continue to be under scrutiny. The reason why people marched after George Floyd and so many of the other brothers and sisters that we're talking about here today, the reason is because the fingers were pointed and are still pointed at police officers and the ones who are not necessarily following the code, but they're following the other code. And that is, it's important. We've got to continue to, if you see something, say something, and consistently do it, and not let up on the pressures that need to be added. The way that you do that in your community is you speak up in your community. And you start in your home. You say it to the people who's in your household. You teach them right from wrong, and then when they get out, they'll be doing the same thing in the community. And after the community, it just continues as a domino effect, and we just tend to get better as a people. There's going to be some people who are going to always experience this. It's the nature of the beast. But the more pressure that we apply, the less likely it'll be to happen as frequently as it is. But yeah, that's I can get too engaged in that part of the conversation.
I think, like I said to you brothers before, one of our questions could have took the whole time. Two things I'll say about police brutality. And you have highly populated African-American neighborhoods. They don't have village police or neighborhood police officers. All their police officers are they come from other spaces. But if you go to, I live in New York, so if you go to places in Long Island, they have county police. So they have people who live in their county who also police their county. We don't have that. I'm not saying it's a fix, but we definitely don't have, I don't have police officers that look like you and I most of the time. And then the next thing I would say is, like you were alluding to, Napoleon, is, we're going to have to start applying pressure, using your civic rights and vote. I know, Black men, when it comes to voting, there's always a conspiracy. But I tell you one thing, I don't care what you think about national, but local makes a difference. Local makes a lot more of a difference than people want to suggest. Your council members, your mayors, your governors, they appoint police chiefs and judges and think those matter. And I think we have to start there. We have to, start teaching our youth about the effects of what their vote means. But again, I don't want, we're going to run out of time here. So I would love to give you brothers just, one last word before we go. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I really do appreciate this conversation. We need to have more and more of these conversations and have more and more of these safe spaces. So thank you again. If you guys go ahead and you can give your last words, and then we'll wrap it up.
Go ahead, Napoleon. Yeah, I'm gonna try to be quick. Thank you, first of all, Black Men and Wellness, for having me. This is always a blast. Thank you. Personally, I know one of the founders and owners, Danielle Busby, Dr. Danielle Busby, one of my homies, longtime undergrad. And but I want to thank y'all for being vulnerable, for being open, for being honest. And I think that this is one of the reasons why I want to put out the book and talking about a lot of these issues is because as Black men, it's not a lot of people to talk to about these things, right? It's like sometimes even me, I don't talk to my wife about some of these things because I don't want to start crying. You know what I mean? I don't want to start being emotional. I don't want her to lose confidence or faith in me, even if that's real or perceived. So yeah, I appreciate y'all, first of all. And I think that the first thing in our book about 100 things every Black man should know before 30 is knowing yourself, right? And then really being able to spend time with yourself and not escape that self-thought, right? That self-awareness, that self-discovery, I think is important. I think it's a never everlasting journey, and it ain't no end. It's just a journey that you get better over and over, and you can become yourself, your best self. So thank y'all. I appreciate y'all.
And I appreciate it 100%. I'm grateful that there exists a Black mental wellness organization for it to make such an impact. The kind of lives that it is changing. People, I mean, all over the place. The people who were sitting in our session and in other sessions. The reality is, if each one of those people take one thing away, we've made such a remarkable difference. So thank you, Black Men of Wellness, for putting on the conference and inviting such remarkable people to be here as well. I took a couple notes from brothers here too, and I appreciate what you had to share, that vulnerability, that courage that it takes to do this. And I just encourage everybody to, wherever you go, whatever you do, take as much courage with you as possible, because life can create a whole lot of fear. And fear is not bad. It just needs to be taken head on. And so whatever you experience, take your courage with you. And thank you again.
Before you guys jump off, can you put your contact info in the chat? Some people are asking.
Yeah, and again, thank you, Black Men's Wellness, for putting this together and providing brothers some space to just talk, right? It's important. Hopefully us brothers here, we can continue to do something like this in the future so that more people can hear. I'm looking forward to your book, James. I think that's going to be a dope hit for a lot of brothers for sure. So, yeah.
Appreciate it, y'all. Yeah, my info is in there. Thank you, Jesse, and thank you, Aubrey, for y'all facilitation. This was awesome.
I'm putting mine in, and James, I need a signed copy of that book.
No doubt. No doubt. Yeah, we're trying to push it out. We got it. We it's already written. We just got to finish it. We got to edit it and finalize some things, but it should be out by this Christmas for sure. All right, y'all.
Thank you. Have a good one, fellas.